Dan's, we've been on the grind, and we're still on the grind. We're trying to pump out some content today.
I'm on the grind because as we're filming, it's the 29th? No, 30th. It's the 30th.
Halloween's tomorrow, so we're 2 weeks into AEP. OE for ACA kicks off, and we have a deluge of news and updates and trying to figure out what's going on. So,
hey, by the way, I'm fine to drop this and be like, hey, I'm better. It is the 30th of October. It would be very helpful if you would, provide us with some more data before OE kicks off, in 48 hours. That would really help us a lot.
The way the industry's evolved to the old SMF, show the dokes meme. Surprise, right here, where it's like, you want a plan? Surprise, everybody.
Yeah.
They don't give us much of an opportunity to make adjustments. It's adjusting on the fly right now.
Yeah, we'll actually do another episode and talk about more ACA stuff, window shopping, all that kind of stuff. But it's
right after this.
It's a crazy week. Most people in the space are doing just Medicare stuff. Their FMOs, Medicare's popping off, and AEP's rolling, and they're good. And we're kind of getting ready for round 2 of our other line of business.
Yep. Government shutdown. A very tumultuous, chaotic AEP is in swing. There's a lot of stuff going on, but one of the things that we wanted to put out a little bit of a mini episode on was the Idaho situation, because, a lot of people may or may not know this, but we control, I don't know if control, but we have a lot of the distribution up in Idaho. Being in Utah was one of the markets that Dan developed really early. We have a lot of Idaho agents, and it's a big portion of our distribution. And so, I feel like we have some additional context for the market, for the industry that hasn't really been talked about, but Idaho's kind of become this flashpoint and kind of this like great hope for agents of what's going on out there, because the insurance commissioner has basically identified Pac Source and United as violating market conditions, and they just put out a cease and desist for them. And so we've been pouring through the cease and desist, and there's some interesting information there. But in order to really kind of understand what's going on in Idaho, because it's kind of a microcosm of what's going on
in other markets,
in the industry in general.
It's just more exacerbated there.
Correct. I think it's important to kind of talk about how we got to the situation in Idaho and what may be different, because, a lot of agents are rightfully advocating to their own state DOIs and NABIP and HOFA, and everybody's getting on board. And this is kind of a big momentum thing for agents right now. So I wanted to kind of set the table and talk a little bit about Idaho and how we got there and some of the market dynamics to why this DOI kind of felt like they needed to do this, because I do think that it's very similar to other markets. But
yeah, well, before you continue, I've had people asking me, well, then if they could have done this, why didn't they do it last year? Or why didn't they do it the year before? Or when some of the other things started popping off, why didn't some of these insurance commissioners already take this from the state level? And a few things, like number one is, I think it's finally gotten to a point where it was almost like, okay, enough's enough. Almost like, there's other things in life too, where you will take and tolerate so much, but you get to a breaking point to where you feel like it's finally enough. Right?
Well, and Idaho is very broken, and we'll talk about that. Yep. And it's broken. The carriers, it's broken.
I would say
the agents.
Minnesota is a pretty broken market.
Yes,
too.
exactly, Minnesota, and it's breaking the seniors too. And so, it's all three of these groups are basically crying out, saying, "Hey, something's wrong here. There's a problem." And so the DOI felt like they needed to kind of intervene there. And so just to kind of set the table, obviously Idaho's is it still the 3rd or 4th least populated state?
It grew a lot because of COVID, because a lot of people in the western coast, like California, Oregon, Washington, they saw huge mass migration over the last 3 years. So they have grown a lot over the last couple of years, but it is a very small state. It's probably bottom 5 or 6, as far as population.
Yeah, I think it's still 3rd or 4th. But Idaho's amazing, and Dan and I love Idaho. It's kind of like I would view our second home state, at least that's how I feel. I own a property up there. Dan, it's been a special place for us up there as a family and growing up, and our kids, and we have a lot of friends and family up there, and we are very, very familiar with not only the market but the state.
Yeah, I think it's a market. It's an area we know where to go fish at. We know where to go hunt. We know, where to go get some
where the potato fields are, where the potato fields are, and where the beautiful areas.
We know where to go get a Bambino.
And look, like Dan said, Idaho is super underrated. It's one of those states where people go to parts of Idaho and they're like, "Wow, I thought this was a giant potato patch." and it's extremely beautiful. And like Dan said, it saw tremendous growth through COVID, just like Utah and all the western states did, as western and eastern coasts kind of locked down a lot. A lot of people, refugeed to these states.
There was two components. There weren't as many restrictions in Idaho or Utah like there were in some of the other coastal states. Less restricted, and then also just bang for your buck and the money, right? It was a combination of property value, cost of living, taxes, everything else that, the quality of life was just better in Idaho. And again, it was a cost of living thing and taxes. So it just drove, it was like twist my arm, it was kind of like a breaking point and caused a lot of that migration. So yeah, Idaho got a big influx of residents over the last couple of years.
Yeah. And so we're kind of setting the table of the market dynamics. And like Dan said, there's kind of that northeastern corridor through Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah, you have three markets, right? You have the northern market, and again, part of the reason that Idaho is fragmented into three markets is just accessing it and accessibility, right?
Very rural and chopped up.
Yeah, and you have like the three biggest metro areas of which
metro is a loose term.
Yeah, when you
there's
talk
only
about,
one metro.
Yeah, and then you talk about a metro. Boise is still a small metro in comparison to a Chicago or an Atlanta or
Salt Lake even,
or LA or Los Angeles is something. So I mean, it's small, but if you look at it, you have the northern market, which is based off of like Coeur d'Alene and Spokane, and then you have the western market, which is the Boise, which is like Ada Canyon area, and then you've got the eastern side, which the biggest one out there is Idaho Falls, which is a dot on the map for everybody nation.
Blackfoot, Idaho Falls, Rexburg.
Yeah, but it's a small market. But those are the three markets, and the reason it's hard to develop and go there too geographically is because even getting flights into Spokane Valley, there's not that much air traffic that goes in there. It is hard to get flights, and even for us in Salt Lake, it's not very accessible or drivable even from Boise over to Idaho Falls.
It's 4 hours.
It's 5+ hours. It's just it's hard to geographically navigate, and so even for us in Salt Lake, the drive to Boise is 5 hours. Yeah. The drive to Idaho Falls is
4 hours, 4.5,
3.5. But then there's not a lot of flight options either. So it's like you're flying private, or there's one flight a day. It's kind of a challenge to get some of these markets. So anyways, and it's all fragmented. It's broken up into those three markets. And, candidly, I don't want to get into too deep of like the underlying politics, but certainly Blue Cross of Idaho has had a very strong influence in that market for a lot of years. Historically, everything from Medicaid to regular health insurance, for a lot of years there in Idaho.
And providing group health for a lot of the employers and two of the major employers up there.
Yeah, on the commercial side, and Albertsons.
And that's how they became who they are.
Yeah, included. So I mean, there's kind of this very historical kind of view of Idaho, and as far as a care perspective too, there's been two key provider networks.
Hold on, before we go there, let's say one more thing. So basically, like we were saying, it became a hot market, right? And what we mean by that is a lot of people moving there, and just like all the other regionals, Medicare Advantage was kind of one of the last areas to really start proliferating in through Idaho. And so other carriers started coming there, opening up new plans that were pretty good. And for a while, you had a very good, robust competition there with some good plans.
That was in 2021, 2022. Correct. And, Idaho, when you look at the states and the reimbursement, is one of the lowest reimbursement states in the whole entire country. Idaho is. And so the only way that some of these carriers were making it work is because you had that high rate environment in 2021, 2022, et cetera, and they could make the financials work, right? Like during those particular years. But without those high reimbursement amounts outside of that kind of environment, those plans couldn't really exist and be profitable.
Well, and I remember, because I have a lot of clients in Idaho, as you did, and a lot of our agents, and during COVID specifically, they were terrified that like utilization was extremely low. You couldn't get Mima out of her rural house to go down to the city to go to the doctor because she was terrified she was going to catch COVID. So utilization was almost non-existent, right? So it was easy money for these carriers.
The other thing that's happening there too is that a lot of the providers in the provider community, they function a lot like, even in the metro areas, they function like FQHCs, and they don't do really value-based care. It has not been a focal point. Like if you go into a big metro market, I don't care what state, a lot of the providers are heavily focused in VBC, in that value-based care. In the Idaho marketplace, it's almost like a flat-out rejection. The providers just don't want to do value-based care. They just want fee-for-service, right? Yep. And so they want original Medicare, they want commercial, they want, traditional payment methods. They don't want to upcode, do everything else and do risk management. They just want fee-for-service. So that is also a very big challenge for Medicare Advantage plans in Idaho.
So carriers there, you had Blue Cross Blue Shield of Idaho, which was a massive, dominant player there. UnitedHealthcare had started doing very well there and had great plans all across the state. You had Humana, you had Aetna there, and then you had another, you had Pac Source, who's one of the ones that's getting the cease and desist, that was more along that upper eastern corridor specifically and down into the Boise market. And then you had another one, Select Health, that's owned by Intermountain Healthcare out in the west. And over the past 2 years...
Did you already include St. Al's or Medigold?
No, not yet. Yeah, so right. I guess they say the Medigold, St. Al's had a plan too that was very small, and we'll get into that. But that's the market dynamics, right? And over the past 2 years, Aetna pulled out last year because they couldn't make the reimbursement rates work. They left the entire state.
Yep.
Select Health also, that was a good regional carrier based out of Utah, had great plans up there and a lot of market share, also couldn't make it work because they couldn't really compete network-wise.
So kind of clarification, timing purposes, 2024, they put out a notice, and Aetna or was it 2023 for Aetna? It might have been 2023, where Aetna said, we're done.
That's right. It was 2023.
It was 2023 that Aetna said statewide, we're just leaving the whole market. And then it was...
Whole state.
Yep. Yeah. And then full SAR. And then it was, 2024, where Select Health said, or was it the same thing?
Yeah, it was 2024.
Yeah, where they said, hey, we're leaving, except for that one little county. They stayed in one county, and I was like, why even stay in one county?
It was like kind of retain the foothold for future back expansion if they could buy a network type thing. And then this year, they just gave up the ghost entirely.
Yep.
They're gone.
They left, so Aetna left entirely. Select Health has now completely exited. And so what you're finding is, this state with low reimbursement rates and these populations, and you have to understand that anytime you're in rural areas too, that, there's typically more risk there. And so Idaho is mostly rural, and you don't have like value-based with a lot of these providers. And so there's more and more risk that's just piling up, and it's kind of centralizing with fewer carriers. And Molina as well, I think it's important to note, Molina also had a traditional MA plan, which...
And a FIDE,
dual
plan.
It wasn't smoking hot, their traditional plan, but they exited that this year as well. So then Molina exited they do still have a dual plan there, but they exited their traditional MAPD. So that was removed from the market as well.
Correct. Yeah. And so who was left? And even earlier this last year, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Idaho, I forget if it's Blue Cross or Blue Shield, anyway,
Blue Cross Idaho.
Blue Cross of Idaho. They went non-commissionable on all their plans halfway through the year, on all their MAs, and even on a lot of their dual plans that had been their hallmark.
Yep.
And that kind of just sent shockwaves throughout the market. And they basically, this AEP, are SARring. They're terminating every plan. It's about 77,000 members.
So all their PBPs are Hickens. Those particular ones, they
nuked them all, every single one of them. So there's 77,000 people out in the marketplace looking for a new plan. Now, what they did is they reintroduced a couple of new plans with either a $59 or $159 premium roughly, and said, your old plan doesn't exist, and you either are signing up for this plan that's, quite a bit more expensive, or this other plan that's a lot more expensive, right? And
which kind of reflects
the market
pricing in the market, right? And the reason, because I've had agents ask me, well, why aren't they in this too? Well, because they got rid of all their old plans, and any of their new plans that are available, brokers can sell and offer them, and they do pay them a commission.
But
so
we have agents, and there's agencies up there whose entire businesses, guys, have been built essentially on the backs of Blue Cross of Idaho, and they have hundreds or thousands of clients that it's like your entire book of business, your entire business is gone. It's hit the reset button. You've got to start fresh this year, okay?
And what's interesting is that people listening to this are very much relating to this who are in like Wyoming or in Minnesota or in some of these other markets too. So, I mean, even though we're taking a deep dive into Idaho, some of these same principles of like the history, what's kind of happened, and we're going to talk about like where it's kind of heading to, because I don't think that, we're out of the woods, and we'll talk about that. But but anyways, it's very relatable to some of these other markets too.
Yeah. So the dynamic is this, guys, that there was going to be 80,000 people into the wind that had to find a new home. And in Idaho, there's two main networks that everybody goes to, and it's red and blue.
Networks, Access to Care.
Yeah, it's St. Alfonso's network, and then there's St. Luke's, and it's literally red versus blue branding. It's the Crips versus the Bloods. It's you either go to St. Al's or you go to St. Luke's.
Yep.
And those are the dominant players up there. Well, there's Humana had fallen out of network with one of them too. So
and back it up, the only kind of plan that actually had both networks
was United.
The only Medicare Advantage plan that has both of those provider networks in a Medicare Advantage plan is United. Right?
So as you can see, guys, we're going into this AEP. Everybody's like, well, United's going to have both of these plans in network across the state. They're looking okay-ish. And it was looking like they were set to add the majority of a lot of these orphan policies that were getting started from Blue Cross. And so United said, hold the phone. We're not that profitable in here. We don't want all those policies. And so it's left all the agents where their options are. If they want to go to St. Al's has a Medigold has a plan there, and they basically doubled their entire membership in the first day of AEP, because it's like, oh, you want to access St. Al's? Well, you got to get on this plan. You want to go to the other network, St. Luke's? Well, your options are not much. You can sign back up for one of these expensive Blue Cross plans, or maybe make it work on a PPO on Humana, and that's kind of it.
And there are some extra costs there when you're accessing out of network on Humana.
Correct.
Right?
So that's the market dynamic, guys. So what happened was, and Pac Source, I don't know, they're not one that we've cared to do much with anyway.
We don't have a contract with Pac Source, so we don't follow it like really closely.
And these are reasons why we don't, for full disclosure.
Yeah, by the way, we get hit up for every contract under the sun, just so that everybody knows, oh, do you guys have Atrio? Do you have Sonder? Do you have this? No, and no. There's sometimes a reason why we are very picky choosy on who are the carriers we have in our portfolio that we distribute and offer products for.
Exactly. So you can see, guys, United was set to get a landslide of enrollments. And so for us, we were salivating over the opportunity to take all these people. And then United basically was like, nah, we don't want any of that business, essentially.
And I can't speak to all of the reasoning behind for it. Like, I'm not speaking on behalf of UnitedHealthcare, but obviously things were not aligning for them, to whether it was like a risk thing, whether it was the financial reimbursement rate, whether it was a combination. I don't know of all of the dynamics. They basically just said, we can't be the vacuum that sucks up all this business.
So Idaho became a mess, and Blue Cross knows that they can't even take all those same 77,000 people back. Even if they were to choose one of the more expensive ones, they just can't support all that. So it needs to get spread out to some other places. But it was like this game of hot potato where nobody wants the business, and that's what's happened in Idaho.
That made me think of South Park, where he says that we call that hot potato.
Yeah. and so you have St. Al's Medigold. We're writing a ton of business there. But again, we like those guys, but you go, it's hard. I'll tell you, it's going to be operationally difficult for any business to 5 or 10x in a very small period of time. And, the future will yet to see how that pans out.
Yeah, time will tell.
And then there's the rumor is that St. Luke's wants to come out with their own plan up there too. And everybody kind of wants to be the ones to make the money and do the plan as well. So they haven't really.
Though? It's like everybody's having a hard time, but it's always somebody who's like, "But I have a better plan, and I'm not going to fail, and I'm gonna be the one to make it work.
Smarter, yeah.
I'm the one who has the silver bullet, and I'm going to be the one who's going to prove everybody wrong and be successful."
So that's and we guys. And regulators out there, CMS, anybody, carriers, if you're listening, we literally had agents and agency owners that have built big businesses, doing a great job over 10 and 20 years in tears, just wondering how they're going to stay in business. Their clients
just so you guys know, like, I'm at my kids' football games on the weekends. Last night I got texted by an agency owner there, and you know who you are. He basically said, I'm getting effing obliterated. Last night, and I have other people, same thing, just in tears, calling me on the weekends, like, I don't know what to do anymore. This whole business that I thought I built for 10, 15, 20 years, I lost half my business in a month. It's been hard for a lot of people.
And ultimately, guys, it's the consumers, right? Like if you're a consumer out there and you don't have a lot of options, and if you try to go back to a supplement, extraordinarily expensive for a lot of these people.
And look, and if you're a broker putting them back on a supplement with an SEP of a plan exit, it's GI, right? So like even like Idaho's a birthday rule state, and like many of them. But then even if you're going, oh, hey, I'm going to put you on a sup because you have a SAR, so I can get you a GI on a sup. What's your commission on that for a broker? You went from having a livelihood to putting them on a GI sup, and your commission's what, like $15 or something like that?
So it's hard. It's hard. It's hard for the consumers. They don't want that. They've, despite what we're going to talk about later, they've liked these advantage plans up there. They've operated well. They performed well for them. They were happy and comfortable with them. And so that's the dynamic. And so as you can imagine, all these agents and agencies and consumers are reaching out to the Department of Insurance and saying, this has got to, something's got to give. And specifically,
so before we keep moving forward though too, so you got to think about like setting the table for the last 2 or 3 or 4 years. Like this has been building, right? Like it has been building in this marketplace. And I would say like I've been trying to tell people like this is not headed to a good place. And I've been telling people for a lot of years that you need to diversify. You need to sell other lines of business. You need to cross sell. You need to expand into other markets and into other states. I mean, these have been things that I have been telling our partners in that marketplace for some time. And it's just been heading towards a cliff. Like you can see the train crash like happening almost, And so this has been going on, like I said, and I think it's just, but it's just different. It hits different when you can see it and you're like in denial of like, things are fine. And then when it's finally here, it's like, no, it's not fine.
Yeah. And so, that's how everything shook out. Right. So, the DOI, decided, hey, let's put a cease and desist. And then in the cease and desist that you can read online, it's really interesting that they only went after Pac Source and UnitedHealthcare. And the reason why they did that is because they're saying that they, more than the others, essentially didn't properly plan and notify the DOI before. And if you dig into what they say in the findings of fact on the cease and desist, it talks about how United had filed an amendment in September and just said, hey, there's going to be some plans that may be non-commissionable in Idaho. But the issue that the DOI is taking with United is that they filed, built, and registered plans there with the intent to pay commissions on some or the majority of them, and then have decided to change course, too late in the game and rescind all commissions there, make everything non-commissionable, and then have gone extra steps to make it extraordinarily difficult for those who do. Because you guys can see, there's probably consumers out there that go, well, I want the United plan because it has both of these in network. That's the choice I want.
To clarify, so that people know, they are still paying renewal commissions to brokers for all their existing business there, and they are paying new commissions on the DSNP there. So there are some commissions there, right? But to your point, the majority of their sales were the traditional MAPD, because the DSNP contract is brand new for UnitedHealthcare there. They just got the Medicaid contract in the state, and so the DSNP plan is new, and they're paying a commission on that new business. But all of their PPO products that they've had there, those legacy products, any new sales of those are not commissionable, right? Which is the bulk or the majority of it, right? And so, that's kind of the table that's set there. Is if you're a broker now in Idaho, it's just a total mess trying to find a plan that actually works for your clients that's commissionable.
Yeah, and so as we just illustrated, of course, there's going to be consumers who do still want that United plan, but they have to find a way without the help of any brokers, because the brokers are not getting compensated. It's suppressed. It's not showing up on the website. It's not showing up.
And the problem is the new 2026 PPO they introduced has a lower premium, or like a zero premium, versus the legacy plan that's there that is above the benchmark too. It's I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's like $40 or something like that.
Roughly.
So if I'm wrong, don't scream at me. But it's something around $40 a month on their legacy PPO. The problem is their new plan that is not commissionable is a lower premium, or like a zero. And that is the rub or the problem.
So they're saying, the DOI is saying that consumers are still trying, even though it's non-commissionable, they're still trying to enroll in that plan that was legitimately filed with the expectation of taking enrollments, and now they can't find the plan. They have to jump through hoops to get it. It's being
and if you're at a broker, it's not on Sunfire, right? So you're going like, someone calls you and you go, I can't represent that plan. I can't do it. And so they're just not able to help them at all.
Well, in the actual findings of fact in the cease and desist, it says that it's not even on United's website.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that I thought was interesting, and again, we're not speaking on behalf of United because obviously they're partners of ours, but it says on bullet point 9 that there was a meeting with a UHC representative who told the DOI that UHC was deliberately discouraging enrollment by any means possible, and that the representative also confirmed in bullet point 10 that the elimination of the commissions was not about UHC saving money from saving agent commissions, but about discouraging enrollment and steering away interest from MA plans, right? And that's the issue, is that it's not that it became the agent's commission as the tipping point of unprofitability. It's all of the others, and they go, well, right. If they can't find it and there's not a commission plan, brokers won't use it, right? So where we're at now, guys, is it'll be interesting to see what happens in response to this cease and desist if they do restore commissions. Because as Dan and I were saying, let's walk through a couple thought exercises. Yep. Let's say United goes, okay, our bad.
Well, so if it's legal, right?
Yep.
Like, and we have this cease and desist, and the state DOI says you have this filed product. If you want to continue to have this filed product in the state, you must pay broker commissions on it, right? Mm-hmm. So then it's legal. They're compelled to do it. So then what happens as soon as
they open it back up and say it's on, it's not suppressed and it's commissionable, what's going to happen?
Yeah, then
gold rush of enrollments.
They're going to rush to it, and then brokers are going to pump up the numbers big time. They're going to do a ton of enrollments on that United plan. And
then what's going to happen next year? United's going to go, well, we weren't profitable in these areas. We were trying to hold the line.
Well, or maybe I don't want to speak too soon, but maybe who knows if they were profitable, but something in their
they didn't want those enrollments, right? And they're going to if they force them, well, you're going to take them anyway. Then where does that leave United if they get a lot of business that they can't sustain? What do they do then? Do they SAR all those, and then we're right back in the same?
So let's say they are forced to then SAR all those plans. Then if you're a broker and agent, what do you do? And then, by the way, that's so much membership in the state then. If all these other carriers are already tapping out and they're already saying, like, wait, we can't handle this business, we're already shedding and putting on premiums of $150 or whatever and $60 a month, and we can't handle, where does the business go?
And it reminds me, either way, even if you were to move all your clients or your block there, it reminds me of that game Lemmings we used to play when we were kids, where all the big hordes of the people would come in and you had to try to make the path so they wouldn't go off the cliff. And it's like, let's say they fix the path, and so each time you have to move all your clients, you're going to lose a significant portion. It just is how it is, And so the
fix would be temporary, right? So like all of our partners, like we're saying, like all of our agent and agency partners up there right now who are saying like, hey, this is ridiculous. This is bullcrap. I can't believe they're doing this. And, again, let's just say UnitedHealthcare comes back online with commissions and Pac Source, and they both have to say, okay, we're going to comply with this cease and desist, and we're going to start paying commissions. Yay! And then the brokers, they all cheer and celebrate, and they think that they have a win, and they're going to go write all these plans, and they're going to get paid their commissions, and it's just a Band-Aid because, again, you're just right back on it next year when they probably have to go SAR that plan.
Yep, right? And again, it just goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning. This is a microcosm of all of the challenges that we're dealing with in the whole Medicare healthcare ecosystem, because all these same things that we're talking about, the providers want to get paid, the providers' costs are going out, the providers' groups want their money, the insurance carriers want their profitability, the agents want their compensation, and the consumers want a good plan at an affordable price.
And the other thing, just kind of at the root of it, just so that everybody knows, it has never happened where you had like two negative rates in back-to-back years with Medicare in like the history. Like when I was going through it, when you had two consecutive years of the Medicare rate being negative or lower,
MLRs?
Yeah, for 2 years in a row, never happened. And so it's like, it's just like that ripple effect that you're feeling it like later on. That's what we're dealing with. because there's been, years with like a lower rate or a negative rate, things like that, but not 2 consecutive years. So I think that's also at the root of it that we're still just dealing with. So
yeah, and so that's kind of all we have to say about that, as Forrest Gump would say. But I felt it was important to give people some context to Idaho. So yes, I'm very happy that the DOI was willing to at least kind of, try to interject. It'll be interesting to see how that happens. But I think even if brokers get what we want and their commissions are restored, that still doesn't fix the overall macroeconomic problems in the marketplace overall for the carriers and things like that. And there still are a lot of challenges and headwinds that would have other longer term implications down the road. And like Dan said, a temporary Band-Aid fix.
Yeah. And so I think the whole reason we wanted to make this episode too is, partly to speak to our partners there in Idaho, and the consumers and the landscape there. Like, we feel you're heard. We completely know that the situation is very bad for you. It totally sucks, especially if you're a local agency who really just deals with beneficiaries in that marketplace.
Which is how a lot of them
are.
Yeah,
which is same with, like, if you're in Wyoming or if you're in, Minnesota or you're in some of these states. Some of you are more impacted than others. And we're just basically saying that, even though you're shouting from the rooftops and say this is bullcrap and I need to be paid commissions, I am not necessarily advocating and saying that these carriers should be forced to do that, because again, it's just there's going to be other downstream, the result of that is going to have other implications. And so, like I said, I don't know if it's better if they pay you commissions right now and then next year they're doing a SAR and a plan exit. Because you're not going to be better off. You know? So it's an overall very, very bad and unfortunate situation.
What we'll do is, I think Dan and I are going to do, if we were king of the country, or the no kings. If we were kings, this is how we would fix healthcare, right? This is how we would fix some things. I think that's one of the things that we should talk about is obviously just the reimbursement rates aren't sufficient. And a lot of times these insurance carriers, they're not going to be forced or compelled to operate in markets where they can't eke out some sort of margin, and we know that we're in an environment, we'll talk about this later, where the carriers are vilified, but it's not so simple. And, it does take a nuanced, contextual understanding of the things so we can get to a healthier marketplace long-term going forward.
Yep. So that's all we got on Idaho. Hopefully that's helpful. A lot of things you can pluck out of there and probably relate to in your local market. Anyhow, we'll
let us know
catch y'all in a bit.
Where we were right, where we were wrong.